Hello, it's me, Cappy. My mommy is the best. Superman will be next. She helps mommy. It makes my nose black. Your dick goes black. And this might go black. You wait for the straw. Brush. Get ready for Pet Super's ugly. Pet Super's glad.
Welcome to Healing for the Soul podcast, sponsored by Robin Stoltman, with this being season number 6, episode number 21. If you are ever looking for a virtual assistant who can edit your social media content, grow your social medias, book clients, and much more that all businesses require, I highly recommend Sphere Rocket for all your virtual assistant needs. The link to Sphere Rocket is at the bottom of this episode. And before we get started, I am your host, Robin Stoltman, and every week I feature different guests to help you become the best version of yourself through different methods you may not have heard of or thought of. So make sure to subscribe, like, and share this episode, and keep coming back for more. And today I have my guest, David Marcus. He has extensive experience and commitment to improving the lives of individuals and families that have made highly respected, and he is a highly respected figure in the field of clinical psychology. His 40 years of experience in treating families under stress have made him a sought-after clinical and legal resource in the Cincinnati area on the topics of parent-child communication and child advocacy. And today he is on the show talking about things that get in the way of the parent-child communication. So let's get started. Thank you so much, David, for being here with our audience.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, no problem. So I know that this is something that is much needed about talking like not just the parent-child communication, like what we were talking a little bit before the show, little bit beforehand, but it's talking about the communication like with the spouse as well at the same time, especially when it comes to parenting.
Yes.
So what is the psychotherapy and the therapy versus like the counseling?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll make this distinction for your audience. You know, we usually use the term counseling and psychotherapy synonymously. You know, they mean the same thing. We have all kinds of people called counselors. We have the social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists. You know, we have all kinds of names for mental health professionals, right? But the distinction is important. Counseling is basically giving advice, all right? Some people do come into psychotherapy and all they may need is advice. I'm thinking of doing this. They kind of need your authority or permission to say, yeah, that's a good idea. But I'll be honest with you, in 40 years of practice, I can count on maybe 2 hands how many people come in for that. You know, people come in to see a psychologist after they've gotten the advice. You know, they've gone to their friends, they've gone to their family, they've gone to their bartender, who knows? But, you know, the point is still, they've gotten the advice and yet that has not changed anything or not enough. I'll put it that way, you know? So they're in a certain amount of psychological pain, all right? And that's what motivates people to come into psychotherapy versus counseling, okay? You know, they come to me and they say, well, I've tried this and I tried it. It doesn't seem to work. You know, my father told me this or my friend told me that. What's going on with me? So psychotherapy is a much different process. And I shared with you earlier a little anecdote about how I found out this difference with the head of medical training at the University of Louisville. Okay, where I went for my doctorate. He asked me, you know, what is psychotherapy? And there I was, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed third-year student. And, you know, I'm going, oh my goodness, what do I say to the medical director? And so I go into the usual litany, you know, well, it's trying to help people by talking them through, blah, blah. And he just shook his head like, like that. And he says, no, David, that's not it. Therapy begins where the words run out. And I went, whoa, I never thought of that. Therapy begins where the words run out. And it got me thinking. I talked, of course, with him about it. when a person first comes in to see a therapist, you know, they tell you what's going on. They give you their story, if you will. And inevitably, they hit places as they're telling you this, where they say things like, I don't know why I feel this way. Or I know I should be doing this, but I don't, and I don't know why. Another obvious one is they'll tell you something and they'll hesitate and they'll go, does that sound normal to you? So obviously they don't understand it. And it really bothers them. That's part of their pain for coming in, because I'm feeling these things sometimes very intensely, and I don't know what is causing that, you know? Now, sometimes there's trauma that's obvious, something horrible happens and, you have PTSD, but we're not talking about that so much. We're talking about just everyday things, patterns in your life that somehow it's dysfunctional. And I don't get it, but it's really impacting my life. Time is a cost. Please, Dr. Marcus, or whoever it may be, help me understand this so I can get beyond it. Say, okay, we're going to go on a mutual exploration. That's what I call it. A mutual exploration of what's really going on. I use an analogy of the jigsaw puzzle. Right now, when you're telling me these things, these are the flat pieces that are easy, the framework. We've got to fill in all the pieces in between to really get the picture. And I'm going to join you in this. The joining, the mutual part, the mutual exploration is very important in setting up the therapy, because I'm in it with you. It's not me telling you, I'm not going to postulate and, we're going to figure it out together. And that's called a merger experience, which is actually very empowering to the client. And it also makes them realize that Dr. Marcus isn't an expert who's going to turn to him and go, oh, you're really messed up, or you're making real big mistakes as a parent. They all come in afraid of that, of course, underneath some level. I don't blame them, that they're trying all these other things. But I never do that. All I'd say is perhaps we're going to go on this exploration, or if it's a parent, I'll say, we're going to tweak your parenting skills. We're going to take what you already know and just add to them. And that puts them at ease. How you set up these things is very important. I can even go into how you set up your office to make sure your office doesn't interfere with the therapy, but we don't have to go into that kind of detail if you don't want to.
No, that's fine. Because I agree with you when you said about you're just adding to what they already know, on how you're setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the resources, it's people never really they think that they've ran out of a resource, but they really haven't. It's they do need to explore it more. And that's where I have found the more that a person knows themselves, the better they can help other people. And it sounds counterintuitive at the same time, but it's when you do know yourself, then you can help other people better. But you can't have that otherwise.
Well, knowing yourself implies learning about yourself.
Yes.
People come into me to learn about themselves. If they could come into me and give a very nice little logical explanation, Robin, of why they're there and this is what's going on with me and all that, they wouldn't need me in the first place. They have it all nailed. You know what I mean? And so when you think about wisdom, the word wisdom, we think of older people who have been there and done that, but more than that, they've processed it and learned from it.
True.
That's gaining wisdom, you see. If you don't process it, then that phrase comes in, well, you make a mistake, you're bound to repeat it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you have to understand what's really going on within yourself. And I have a term for this, all right? Because that's what I've written a book about this, and and I'll get to that later. But I call it a soothing presence.
Okay.
A soothing presence. And I'll explain that to you now, because this is really an important thing in our conversation going forward. All right. In its simplest form, a soothing presence is simply somebody who's okay when you're not okay. All right. When we think about the people that we turn to when we're upset, it's usually particular people, hopefully your spouse, you know what I mean, if you're married, but friends, family, Uncle Billy, whoever it might be. But invariably, these particular people, there are always certain people, they're okay when we're not. All right. And what happens is they listen, of course, the act of listening, Dr. Gordon way back from the 70s, and et cetera, but they do more than that. They stay centered themselves. They don't get into this mindset. This is one of the things I had to think about a lot, of empathy, where people say empathy is feeling what another person feels. No, they don't need you to feel what they're feeling. They need you to help them to understand how they're feeling and put words to it in the way I do it anyway, words to it so they understand it. So if you go to a person and you begin to tell them something that's heavy on your heart, and all of a sudden they cut in and say, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I've been through it, and this is what I did. You're already laughing, and this is what you should do. If it was a really good friend, you turn to them and say, please, just hear me out, because you're not ready to hear that. In fact, you might not even have asked them for that. If it wasn't a good friend, you'd say, thank you, and go find a good friend. I mean, it's like, and yet, I'll segue a little bit. Parents do this with their children all the time in the name of trying to make them feel better. Now, this is going to sound very radical coming from a clinical psychologist who deals with children, right? But I really wish I could get rid of the phrase, make feel better, because it does not work. Just like the example I gave you. Parents are always doing this. The only difference is you wouldn't, if you're an adult, you might say, just hear me out. A 5-year-old's not going to do that. They're just going to go, and you think you've got it nailed because basically you cut off the whole process, to tell you the truth, because you told them what to do and they're not ready to hear it. Never mind. But you see what I'm getting at? And then, hey, I'm a good parent. 4 days later, something happens similarly. They get bullied again, and they're just as upset as they were 4 days ago. I thought we talked about this. No, you didn't. And here's where we get into one of the things that you initially asked me about, which is the common emotional language between parents and children. Okay. Now that's a process that really needs to be understood. And it's something I'll just take credit for it. I mean, emotional language is not new. A common emotional language may be, right? Because the assumption that I just gave you that, oh, I went through it too, and I felt what you felt, and therefore you feel the same way as me, is a bad assumption to make. Okay, even if the child feels something similar, how they'd explain it is going to be totally different. So even if you're right, you're wrong, because you're cutting off the process of them helping him get out this material in your soothing presence. So they can sort of borrow your okayness for a while and say, okay, this doesn't upset mommy. And eventually they can get what I call a safe emotional distance from it and look at it themselves. Now young children are going to need more than that. They're going to need guesses on how to help them. But older people, older teenagers, tweens, adults, no, they'll get there. But you've got to work the process so that they really understand. Because especially with teenagers, I'm bouncing around here. If you tell a teenager what to do, you must have teenagers with 11 children, Robin. So
I don't yet. Mine are all 10 and under.
Oh, then you've got that. That's a whole other topic, okay? But
yes.
Anyway,
so mine are all at the beginning. I'm programming them now on how to handle different things. And I was thinking about that as you were speaking about, like, my son with autism. His cat, he's 8 years old, but his cat had took off and he doesn't understand why. And I've been trying to tell him that, like, we don't know why the cat ran off, like how the cat got out. We don't know any of that. But it's like I've been helping him process it, because I'm like, I understand how you feel, because I've had that happen where cat runs off and just doesn't come back. Like, I dealt with that as a child, but my parents had gotten rid of the cats and the dogs. That's what had happened. And I figured that out on my own. But for him, I'm just like, I don't want to tell him that the cat's dead, because I don't know. But I've been trying to help him and listen to him in his understanding about how he feels about the cat and how, to help him in that.
Doing that is, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I
Oh,
cut you
no,
off.
no, 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 you're fine. You're perfectly fine. So that's what I was thinking about what you'd said, like the common emotional language, like before they get to the teenage years, even something like this, as the example that I'm giving, like with my son, it still plays into that, like that make feel better that you had said.
Yes.
Um, at the same time, it's like I'm just trying to listen and help him process it because he is different. He processes things
Yeah.
different, and it is
Right.
more challenging.
With an autistic child, yes, it would be more challenging because it may be very difficult for them to come up with words. You know what I mean? That's part of the syndrome, if you will. Although depends on where he is on the spectrum. You know what I mean? But okay, still, you're right. Um, Barring the autistic part of it, developing a common emotional language with your child. Let me explain how that works. Rather than making the assumption that, oh, you'd explain your feelings the same way I would explain mine, you help the child find their own words to, to explain. I'll give you an example. It's the easiest way. Anger, right? Rather than saying you're really angry or, things like that, that's my words. And I'll turn to a child and, I remember one 9-year-old boy who got really, really angry because he was a pitcher. And at 9 years old, you stink as a pitcher. You know what I mean? And so he gets so mad he'd run off the field, you know what I mean? And so they brought him in to see me, I can't help your pitching, but anyway, I said, tell me about the anger you feel when you run off the field. It makes me volcano mad, Dr. Marcus. Volcano mad. And I said, okay, let's make that a 10 on a scale of 10. What would be a 1? Well, I don't know. When my mom makes me eat my peas. The hard one is coming up with 5, the middle one.
I can imagine that one.
When my sister bugs me, from now on, instead of saying really mad or whatever it is, I'll say, was I volcano mad or eat your peas mad? You see what I mean? With younger children, they express themselves through movement. 3 years old, you don't expect them to come up with a lot of words. So this mad, this mad, this mad, or this. It amazes me how 3-year-olds can touch their hands behind their back. It would break my scapula to try to do that. But that's how mad. One of them came up with universe mad, Dr. Marcus. And then I start using those words because those are the words that have meaning to that child. I'll even counsel the parents to say, hey, start using this language because that's what has meaning, true meaning to your child. And it'll make them feel like you're really understanding. Rather than go into, what you just said, explaining how I felt and what I went through. That actually cuts off that process if you think about it, And again, the child will go, because they're little and you're big and and they're not going to, you really expect your 7-year-old to say, just shut up and listen, Mom, will you? No, they're not going to do that.
No.
They better not do that, But
No.
you see, yeah.
But still, it's like in his case, he needs trouble. He has the trouble finding the emotion and labeling it. Where my other kids, they're able to say like what they're feeling, and then I'm like, well, I can understand that at that point. It's just.
Well, yeah.
It's
I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just saying like because each child is different in how they communicate. Like when you said the volcano man, then you're gonna want to use those terms.
The commonality is you.
Mm-hmm.
If your children have an emotional language, it's because you practice it with them.
Yes.
I've seen adults who never got that. Sometimes it's cultural, like the British stiff upper lip. We don't talk about emotions, or families that just never go there because they're uncomfortable. So they never developed it. It develops through practice. And now we have adults who have no emotional language. And that's where I have to help them to find one, And sometimes, and this is the danger of it, how many times have you turned to your children and said, use your words. Don't hit your brother, use your words. That's a typical things that parents tell their children. Use your words. because young children don't have the words, and so they act on their emotions behaviorally, right? They have a tantrum.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, and so, and I'm here to tell you, parents often make this another silent assumption that I have a bright child, therefore they have an emotional language. No, that's a very bad assumption to make. It's a totally different skill, right? In fact, they praise their children's intellect so much that the children will start to cerebralize their emotions rather than actually experience them and be able to express them really. I've seen adults who have to rationalize all their emotions, ends up self-censoring themselves because it doesn't work. But in any case, the development of this language, you've obviously done this with your children. With adults who don't have it, I'll go to sensations. I don't have the words for that. Where do you feel it in your body? Well, my stomach gets tight. Tell me about a tight stomach. And then we find words for that. And then we go from there. Sometimes they'll automatically start making associations to previous events. Maybe sometimes not. But we have words now. They also know, hey, this is tapping into something within me because I can feel it, even if I don't understand it with words. This is a very deep process when you think about it. It's really getting into, much deeper than counseling, than giving advice.
It does.
So with children, with young children, if they don't have the words, sometimes you have to make guesses with them. My guess is that was tough. Now, a child understands the word tough. I use that word purposely because tough can be tough, sad, tough, mad, tough. It could be a lot of everything. And then with very young children, I'll draw the faces: a happy face, a sad face, a scared face, like we do, and point to the face, and I'll label it happy. I'll label it, and then they start using those words. You know what I mean? Yeah. I have a game that I've played with the kids to help to develop words. I call it Mad Ball. And Mad Ball is this. I had to go find a certain ball that wouldn't crack my walls, but okay. I have a ball, and I'll say to the young boy, 5, 6, say something that really makes you mad, and then throw the ball into the wall as hard as you can. Now, little boys love to show you how tough they are, So, when my dad took my transformer away, wham, you know what I mean? Now, I got a ball that makes a lot of noise but doesn't dent my wall.
Yep.
Oh, that was really bad. He's grinning from ear to ear, because I'm attaching words to his actions, and then I'll make up one myself. Again, a merger. I'm doing it, and I'll take one that I heard from Mom that he doesn't like. Oh, I hated it when my mom used to, tell me to go to my room. Wham! Me too. Wham! It's like that, and it loosens the child up because stranger danger and all this stuff, and it worked. The funny thing was, the first time I did it, because my office, the wall to the waiting room, was the same wall that was in my office that I was using for Mad Ball. So the parents out in the waiting room, they're hearing boom, 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 and they knock on the door real timidly, Dr. Marcus, is my kid okay? So after that, I had to explain every time I played the game, you're going to hear noise. It has nothing I'm not hurting your child. It was really funny. But that's just another medium. Play therapy is another medium. Third person. Dollhouses, pictures, stories. It's easier for a child to talk about somebody in the third person than in the first person. That's what play therapy is. They usually say at the end of it, oh, that's just like me. But talking about, the doll or the picture or the character in the story who they identify with, that's another approach to make it safe, because children, we've had young children, they experience their emotions very intensely. And so they can be intensely gleeful about the little toy and then throw a temper tantrum. They don't have the words, so they express it this way. And sometimes it overwhelms them, so they shut it down. this is a way of doing this. I take guesses. My guesses, it's tough because the guess, they can correct me. If I say, oh, I'm sure it made you really sad. Well, the little kid's going to go, uh-huh. Again, we have to be aware of who we're dealing with. And so how close is that guess? Well, scale of 1 to 10, that's only a 2. Well, let me take another guess. You know what I mean? That type of thing. It's a way of approaching it to make it safe. And that's what a soothing presence does. I'm giving you techniques. Like you soothe an infant by holding them and cooing to them. As they get older, you soothe with words and hugs. You know what I mean? With an adult, it may just be words. You see? So how you are a soothing presence depends on the stage of development, as well as the child's own perceptions, even of you, which we haven't even gotten into yet. But okay, yeah.
But no, that all makes sense of how you've explained everything. Because, like, for me, I forget that, like, not everybody parents the way that I've parented, but, like, to me, it's always come intuitively, like, for natural, like, how to parent, because each one is different. But then at the same time, it's like I forget that that's why a lot of adults have problems, even with their emotions. And I think that's where we've got more of these emotional problems now in society more than ever, because the parents did not talk about the emotions. They didn't bring those things up. And it's like, for me, I was raised by a boomer. So my mom's in that generation where they didn't talk about their emotions. They didn't share the emotions. Big girls don't cry. And I hate when parents sit there and say, boys don't cry. That's the reason why men are the ones that go out and shoot people. Like, on average, they're the ones that go out and do those things because they're suppressing the emotions. They're not allowed to show them. And at
You're
the
right.
same time, it's like, if children were allowed to express the emotions in a healthy way. I like the game that you were talking about, because I'm just like thinking, yeah, a parent would come like, what's going on here? I'm just saying. But it's like,
it was funny.
Yeah, it is, because I'm thinking about it in my mind. But it's like, at the same time, it's like if they were allowed a healthy outlet of teaching them how to do it. Like, one of the things I've done with my kids is to handle their anger is I literally got them a boxing
Dummy?
yeah, that's what I had gotten. It's like a
Bounces
boxing
back?
dummy. Yes, I got that for
Yeah.
them.
I've told people to get that sometimes too.
Yeah, and it's been very helpful, because I'm like, just pretend like you're mad at somebody and just start hitting it instead of hitting your brother, as an example.
You can use that as a madball thing. You can actually, if I was going to tell you to tweak it, like I said, we tweak what parents do. You could tweak it and say, okay, think of something that really makes you mad, and then punch that darn bunny. That bunny? No, dummy. Excuse me, not the bunny. That would be bad. And then, you know what I'm saying? And you can take guesses. My guess is when mommy does X, it makes you, bam, punch it. And you can actually gain some real insight, but you're also making it safe because you're okay. You're the soothing presence. You're not sitting there getting defensive. You're not trying to redirect them. You're not trying to make a joke of it. There's all kinds of, you're not trying to make them feel all better. I said earlier, you're helping him to express it so it gets from in here to out here in your soothing presence. Whew. All right. It's different than catharsis. It really, really is. All right. Or free association, because you're guiding this. All right. It's
I'm guiding it the whole time.
Yeah. And you're learning, and you're also dealing with his emotional perception of you. If the history of the child is like you said, boys don't cry. Well, you think that son is going to go to his parents when he's really hurting? Of course not. Because he's going to hear boys don't cry. He's going to be ashamed. He's going to be made to feel worse, not better. He's not going to be soothed. The opposite, you see. So, that's just one, obviously, small example. But the other ones I said, trying to make feel better and cutting off the process, redirecting, which is something parents do all the time. Sometimes making light of it, trying to get the child to laugh, try to change their mood. Okay, but it's not going to change anything the next time the same thing happens.
True.
He's not going to laugh it off. You know what I mean? When it happens again. Actually, all these ways are parents' ways of saying, I'm uncomfortable, so I'm going to make myself comfortable and do what I think the child needs. Now, often we parent the way we were parented.
That is true.
That's what we know. And I say, I'm going to tweak what you already know. Well, what they already know is typically how they were brought up. But sometimes that wasn't the best. Like, for instance, if one of the things, okay, there's a process called internalization. Are you familiar with the term, Robin? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes, like where
Well,
you're
let me tell you how.
internalizing everything.
Well,
Versus
there's a
expressing.
subtlety to it.
Okay.
Let me explain what it can mean a lot of different things. So,
yeah.
Internalization is almost like subliminal learning. There are things that get inside you, that emotional things actually, that get in there below your level of awareness. For instance, I'll get a little sociological with you. Prejudice. It's not like, okay, if you've had an experience where 7 people of a certain race beat you up, yes, so you have a reason to be prejudiced, quote unquote, or afraid. Mostly that never happens. When you're a child and you hear the jokes or you see the reactions, and one of the things a child internalizes, Robin, is how to react to stress, and they learn that from their parents. Okay. For instance, this is one of the reasons, and this is serious, why abused children can become abusive parents. They will swear up and down and sideways that they would never do to their children what happened to them. But at moments of stress, we regress. Where do we regress to? These internalized responses. And they hit. And they regret it later when they're not regressed anymore. You see? But the pattern's done. The pattern's there now. You see what I'm saying? The same thing can happen with a soothing presence. If you want your kids to be resilient, which is what we're talking about, because they express things and learn from them, gain wisdom. By the way, being resilient as a child is what we call stress tolerance as an adult. And stress tolerance is very important as part of the maturation process.
Interesting.
Okay?
Did not know that.
Okay. Well, think about it. A child who isn't resilient throws a temper tantrum. Okay, they're 5. We expected, we waited out. Okay, if you don't, we teach them the words, the emotional language, so they now express things with words rather than through throwing a temper tantrum. If you never get the words, now a temper tantrum in a 5-year-old is what we deal with. Temper tantrum in a 17-year-old could be jail time. Something in between has to happen. You see what I'm saying? Again, they regress. They don't have the words. Where do they regress to? My parents used to hit me. It's a perfect storm. You see? You wonder why there's a lot of recidivism in prisons and stuff? Well, this is one of the, not all, the environment, obviously, but, this is part of it. And oftentimes the treatment for these people are defensive. They're, it's behaviorism, punishment, reinforcement. And it's very strict. If you do this, you get more freedom. If you do that, you get less freedom. And that's fine, except so they can maybe be able to respond in the facility. But once they get out there and they don't have that strict structure, what are they left with? You see what I mean? Doing therapy with those people is very, very difficult because sometimes they have things going on. They could be schizoaffective. They could be schizophrenic. I mean, you don't do this type of insight-oriented depth therapy with people like that because I'm throwing psychobabble at you, but there's something called ego islands. And all of a sudden they can jump to a different island and get really out of control and freak out. They can go into a psychotic episode if you try to go there. Those people need the structure. External structure to contain their internal chaos, basically, is what we're talking about. Medicine can help that too. But I'm talking about people who are out there who are, functional, at least to the point where they're not incarcerated and they're not, you know, in a mental facility,
Yeah,
So,
it totally makes sense.
yeah. So there's a process here that I want to explain to you that will really help. Okay. Here's the spiel, if you will, all right? Because this is the process. This is how I introduce it. We all have an emotional space within us, Robin. And of course, when we think of an emotional space, we point to our heart. But obviously, it's emotional associations in our head. By the way, most of our associations in our brain are emotional, not logical. But we won't get into that either. But okay. And this space, this emotional space, this psychological space can get filled up. And what fills it up is intense emotion. It's anger, fear, anxiety. We can name them, In fact, in little children, I mentioned it before we got on the recording, intense glee. Little children it's the intensity of their glee in getting this little tiny toy or something like that. The point I'm trying to make here is what happens when we're filled up. It's uncomfortable. It feels very intense, like we're not in control of our emotions because we don't understand why we're feeling that way, like I just explained. So we feel out of control. It's scary. And we know when we're filled up. That's the thing. This is not a concept. This is a fact. We have phrases for it. I've had it up to here. The straw that broke the camel's back. Right? See what I'm saying?
Heard of them. Yep.
Yeah, been there, done that, And so what happens is we focus inwardly to try to deal with our own intense emotion. And we may do various things. We may go for a walk. We may watch TV and distract ourselves. We may get it off our chest with somebody. We may journal. We may kick the dog, but I hope you don't do that. That type of thing. But the point is this, when we're that filled up, we're focused inwardly. So by definition, we are not focused outwardly on what people are saying to us. You ever hear the phrase a blinding rage? Blinding rage.
Yes.
That's a good explanation. When somebody is so filled up with rage, they're virtually blind to everything around them. You can give the most logical, cogent explanation for they misunderstood something and didn't feel this way. They won't hear it. They'll hear that 5% of what you say or that tone of voice that you say that somehow makes them angry. And then if that becomes the pattern, the person who's trying to explain things throws up their hands and says, I can't talk to you. And now the walls build up.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah.
And a lot of couples come in to see me. They even say, there's a wall between us. Yeah, there is. How you perceive one another is based on this history of not being able to talk to one another. No kidding,
Mm-hmm.
So the point I'm trying to make is before somebody can even hear you, you have to empty them out.
That is true.
Now we're back to the soothing presence, aren't we? Someone who's okay when we're not. Someone who's listening and not interrupting. Even if it's about you. I hate when you do this, and you're going to want to defend yourself because they may have their perception's off the wall, but it's built on a history of how they've seen you for a long time. And you can say, well, I didn't do that today. Well, they perceived it this way over 4 years. You know what I mean? So it's not going to make a difference. There's so much here, but okay. So how do you?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just wondering, before we close the show today, what is
so much more? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know there's a lot. I know, like, we were just like scratching the surface really today. So what's the best way our audience can get in contact with you to find out more?
Sure. I have a website, parentrx.org. Okay. My email address is dsmarcus, Ph.D., dsmarcus, Ph.D., at parentrx.org. And they can get in touch with me. And I have other podcasts listed where I talk, obviously, about some of the same things that we're talking about. We really need to get to the gist of how to empty somebody out, because that's key to everything that we're talking about, right? Do we have time to go a few minutes to talk about that? To explain how to empty out somebody is something that's very important for people to realize, is that you have to empty out somebody on 3 different levels. These are I'm naming the levels, so these are my levels. The first is the obvious level, which I call the here and now. And I always use a silly example just to show people what I mean. You didn't take out the garbage. Now we have lots of words, logical explanations for why you should take out the garbage. This is a logical level. It's feeling the smell, it's your job, easy. The next deeper level is the history level. This is the 6th time I've asked you to take out the garbage. Now, obviously, the reaction to having to ask 6 times is going to be much more intense than the first time. But if you were somebody who did not know the history, somebody just in the room, they say, whoa, why are you getting so mad? So he didn't take out the garbage. Logic begins to break down, all right? The deepest level is like what I call the tapped into level, and I've already used that term with you. The fact that you didn't take out the garbage after I asked you 6 times means you don't listen to me. I hate when people don't listen to me. My mother would never listen to me. This one can go anywhere. You see? Now, unfortunately, people stick to level 1 because that's the one that's obvious. But the logic, most of the intensity of the reaction is coming from the history level and the tapped into level. And this is what happens between couples all the time. They try to resolve their emotional issues logically, but they're in an emotional relationship. And so they don't get to these levels because they're not aware of them. You see? Once you're aware of them, and again, the logical level's right there. The history level, we know when a person is emptying out on the history level, Robin, when they say things like, you always do this, or you never do that. They're referring to previous historical events. Tell me about that when I've done that. The deepest level is also almost obvious, but you got to get there, which means you have to go through the history level first. But, which is, when you do that, it makes me feel like X. So you can ask that. My guess is when I do something like that, it's tough for you. I like that word tough, like I said. It is tough. Well, how's it tough? Well, it really exasperates me. Tell me about being exasperated. I'm sure I do that. Here's the therapeutic response. You take responsibility for making a person feel a certain way, even if you don't agree with it, because you're dealing with what's tapped into. So it's just saying, hey, that's not my doing. You got to help the person realize, or come to somebody like me, and help the couple to say, so that when they have these conversations, they go, wait a minute, time out. I'm regressing back to what's been tapped into. It has only this much to do with what you did, and that much to do with the fact that you're tapping into something that was already there. I've had couples come in on the verge of divorce, and once we've gone through this and regression and internalization, all that stuff we talked about before, they say, wow, now I understand why he reacts this way or she reacts this way. Can you help us some more? Maybe we don't need to get divorced. You know what I mean? And that's happened more than once.
That's a good thing, though.
Well, yeah, it fits. That once people can understand, you're putting in the jigsaw puzzle pieces. Once they understand it and see the picture, that gives them okay, here's the basis of therapy. Not how to do therapy, but the basis of therapy. When somebody feels truly heard and understood, that gives them the hope that things can be better. It's what you do with your kids, what therapists do with their clients, what lawyers do with their clients. All right? When you feel clearly heard and understood, it gives you the hope and therefore the motivation. It works wonderfully with teenagers. If you talk to my parents, I'm walking right out of here. But by the end of the 3rd or 4th session, when they realize, hey, Dr. Marcus isn't such a dope after all, you know what I mean? more often than not, they say, well, can you talk to my mom and dad about that one? Sure. You see what I mean? And so I can share these things. I can share how I tweak the parents' skills so they can do this, empty out their child and be a soothing presence, etc. Develop the language. And I know when the parents are really making progress, when instead of them coming to me and ask me what's going on with their child, they come to me and say, this is what I learned about my child this past week. They've developed the skill. They now have access. Access is influence. If you can get that kind of access, you can influence what's going on. Without it, you're just reacting to their behavior. So I tell parents when they come in to see me that the idea of coming to see me is to get rid of me. Once you have these skills and you're in touch with your child and they feel safe and you understand what to do, you're going to help your young child develop resilience. They'll internalize a soothing presence and they'll be able to do the same thing for their children. It's a wonderful legacy. And this is what I've kind of devoted my professional life to. I wrote a book. I'm going to give you the title of it. I have an agent who's selling it even as we speak, But let me give you the title, at least the working title of it, all right? So I can plug my book. You don't mind, do you? Okay,
nope, you're fine.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It is called, so far, Parent RX, Prescriptive Wisdom, Tips and Strategies for Communication with Your Child. Okay? Mm-hmm. This book I've written for parents. We haven't even had time to go into everything that's in the way of modern parents, why they can't be a soothing presence because of all the pressures they're under and work and time pressures and financial pressure. I mean, oftentimes I have to talk to parents about changing lifestyle. There's no way you're going to be able to be a soothing presence for each other or your children if you're always reacting to the next fire. You know what I mean? You're just putting out fires and putting out. So, yeah, and that's part of social media is another problem. But these are all sociological issues that we're not going to be able to get into in this discussion. But I use the term soothing presence. I can finish with this. Soothing presence rather than soothing person for this reason. The presence is the environment. The person is part of that environment. To be a soothing presence means the home has to be peaceful. The outside's not impinging on you. Work pressures, the computer or the cell phone, I always think of this, and this little anecdote, if it's okay with you. You ever see the movie Inherit the Wind?
Nope.
Inherit the Wind. It's about the Scopes monkey trial back in the 20s, evolution. The person was teaching evolution. It was against the law to do that. Okay. Very famous because Clarence Darrow, a very famous attorney, and William Jennings Bryan got involved in the case, all right, as defending attorney. And there was a movie with Spencer Tracy about the Scopes trial. And during it, he's trying to explain, we got to get beyond just creationism because things evolve, He's trying to he's a little litany to the jury, about the cost of progress. This is early 1900s. He goes, well, women, you can have the vote, but you lose the ability to hide behind the powder puff. You can have an airplane, but the birds will lose their wonder and the clouds will stink of gasoline. And the one that always sticks with me was, as a psychologist, is the last one. You can have a telephone, but you will lose the charm of distance. We have no distance, personal space, whatever you want to call it. There's the phone, there's the computer, there's our kids in our face. There's, you can't just leave the work at the office anymore. You're up at 2:00 in the morning talking to India on a project. There's so many things I call them impingements. They impinge upon this soothing presence. So it's not just teaching these techniques. It's preparing the family and the parents to have an environment where they can even do them. Because they're human beings, and if you're all filled up, all you're going to do is react to the next. You'll put out the next fire, but that's about all you'll be able to do. You won't be able to be responsive. And being a soothing presence is being responsive, and you've got to be in the place to do that. The emotional place. If you're filled up yourself, you can't do it. You're a human being. You have to focus on yourself and get rid of that stuff. This is why it's good to have a, if a couple, whether, whatever kind of couple you are, can soothe one another. Because not only does that make you a soothing presence for your children, it also models what it means for your children. And that's what they internalize. I think I've talked your ear off here, Robin. I hope that's okay.
Oh, no, you're perfectly fine. Because, no, like, all of this does make a lot of sense. Because I know, like, in general, like, if you look at the parenting, especially like in the modern world, like everything that you've mentioned, I've heard, I think it's a stupid term, but I've heard of parents in the Gen Z that are calling it like they're overstimulated. And I think it's a stupid term myself, because I'm like, one, it's like you don't know how to handle stress is what you said. That's what I heard. They don't know how to handle it correctly, because it's like you're overstimulated, but then you're switching to social media, to scrolling. You're switching to all these other things that are still being thrown at you. But you think that you're still not overstimulated. I don't like the term.
Well, you're correct, but we can actually connect them. If you're overstimulated, that's stressful.
That's what it is. Yeah, and it's like what you said, like learning how to handle that stress, because the kids repeat it.
They need the charm of distance.
Yes, they do. Like the disconnect from the internet. They need to be disconnected from other people. They need that quiet space.
Yes, and they can use that space for themselves, to relate to one another, and then to focus on what their children need.
Yeah.
And okay, it goes even a lot further than that. We don't have time to go over all this stuff, but
yeah. No, you're fine. And then like too, I was thinking like with my husband, like for him, I've trained him over time and vice versa. I'm like, it's like when I'm mad, for example, to leave me alone. Give me the space, give me the distance, because one of the things for me when I was a child is I would hear things that I didn't need to be hearing. And I'm like, I'm not going to make those same mistakes. So it's like walking away from it. So when you're talking about that space, the kids need the space, but then the other parent needs the space too at the same time. And then it's like, give me the ability to calm down, and then we can talk about it. So I'm relating to what you're saying. Like
you are relating.
Thing you're talking.
But one of the difficulties comes in when you see couples. I see couples, of course, is that where they regress to. You regress to, I need space.
Yes.
Okay. That's fine, but I need to think about things. Maybe come up with the words to describe things. Just calm down. That works for you. If your spouse says, I'm too anxious, I have to deal with this right now to reduce my anxiety, let's talk about it. I need space. No, let's talk about it. You see what I mean?
Oh yeah, we used to be that way. And then I'm like, when we sat down, we talked about it, and then I explained why I'm doing this, because I've learned to change my own pattern behaviors. Yeah. But it's like when you explain it, like you said, the communication part of it, that makes sense then as to why I'm doing my thing a certain way. And then now he's ironically been doing the exact same thing. Like he walks away and he needs a space, and then he's realized, oh, we have less arguments that way. And it's like, yes.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay.
Yeah. But
you're paraphrasing me. What you're doing is describing what gets tapped into.
Yes.
And once he understood that, oh, it isn't me. It's you. But that's okay, because that's simply what you need. You see what I'm getting at? It's It's not a bad thing. It's just you're different than I am.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. You know. So yeah, you're right on the money is what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm just putting some terms to it so people can understand what they're really trying to accomplish. You
Yes,
see what
and
I mean?
yeah, and that's very important. That's why I was giving back that example of like how I've used it, just trying to help and trying to explain things at the
Mm-hmm.
same time as I've adapted and evolved in my own learning and my own processing of everything.
Okay.
So, what's the best way for the audience to get in contact with you before we close today?
Through my email. What I said, I'll repeat it again. It's DSMARCUS all one word, DSMARCUS at parentrx, PARENTRX.org. Parent,
Awesome.
DS Marcus, PhD at parentrx.org. And they can look at my website and hear more of these types of things, which will probably spark, more, questions and answers maybe, but that's fine. They can get in touch with me that way. I do some consulting work if that's what they need, that type of thing. And this is part of my trying to build a platform for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the book, I go through all this and I actually give examples. Parent says, child says, parent says, child says, parent says. And I annotated saying, this is what you just accomplished with your child. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I use different scenarios of different children at different age, stages of development. You see what I'm getting at? And so it's not just me pontificating about what you should do. I'm giving you examples so you can actually follow it. But even so, I have so many parents coming to me saying to me, Dr. Marcus, I wish I had you in my ear on Thursday night because I was dealing with my teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can't do that. Sometimes, the teenager will call me and say, can you talk to my parents? And I will, and I'll soothe them so they can soothe their kid. I actually give out my cell phone number. And people say, oh, don't do that. People will abuse it. In 40 years, I've had exactly one person abuse it. People really appreciate the fact that you're there.
Yes, they do. There's a difference.
I've had teenagers come in who I saw as 6 years old or 8 years old come in to see me as teenagers. This is to make sure that I'm still around. They just walk in and go, hi, Dr. Marcus, I just want to say hi, because I'm still a resource in some way. One, he was a 10-year-old, very smart aleck, chubby kid who was socially inappropriate. His parents fought, all this type of stuff. I saw him for a couple of years. All of a sudden, 6 years later, this big, tall, skinny guy comes in with long hair, but the same horn-rimmed glasses. Oh, I recognized him. And he said, Dr. Marcus, I just wanted you to know that I got into Northwestern University, smart kid, and I'm studying psychology. Thank you. There are some things that just make you feel really good. That was one of them. I've had that experience before. And, that's what I do. This is what my life has been, as far as my professional life, is helping people to learn about themselves and communicate effectively. And that's where all this stuff that we've been talking about today has come from. My own thinking over the years of learning from my patients. I didn't learn this in a book. There's stuff I did learn from a book that we don't have to go into at this point, but it also reflects on child development, but we're not going to get into that right now.
Yeah.
So, things to be aware of as a professional when you're dealing with children of different ages. Okay, but we don't have to get into that part of it.
Oh, no, you're perfectly fine. So I just want to remind our audience to be sure to share and like and subscribe the Healing for the Soul podcast with everyone that you know. And I encourage you to follow myself, Robin Stoltman, on social media and my guest, David Marcus, as well. Do you have social medias, or is they're going to be able to find that directly on your website?
Website. Well, I list all the podcasts and their links on the website. In fact, once we stop recording, I want to talk to you about that, of course,
Okay.
So do you want to do your farewell or whatever? I don't know how you close things off, Robin, so you tell me.
No, it's all right. So be sure to share and subscribe and like Healing for the Soul podcast with everyone you know. And I encourage you to follow me, Robin Stoltman, on social media and my guest, David Marcus, as well. So thank you for your time and your energy while listening to today's episode of Healing for the Soul podcast.
That's all good, make sure you for fun. Help that fall bucket. Destroy. Quack, quack. Bye-bye. Well, next time. Now you got it.